It's fully 18 years, I realise, since the Blair government kicked off the Turner Review of Pensions. And that makes me feel very old, since I worked on the green paper that set it rolling as a young Whitehall advisor. And I've kept an eye on all of the issues it raised in the years since, including in Prospect, where we have dedicated money pages and policy pages that often have a lot of pensions. The immediate impetus back in 2002 was grim forecasts showing that far too many people were due to retire on inadequate incomes. And although an awful lot of things have changed since, state pension rationalisation, the introduction of auto-enrolment, which really is a rare successful story of cross-party consensus that has got millions saving, that basic impetus of too many people heading for retirement income too low is with us still. And Adair Turner himself always warned that the 2020s would be, in the title of today's session, crunch decades, because in his words, the demographic bulge of the baby boomers will be all of them pretty well into retirement in these years. And as the crunch decade arrives, we still need somehow to find a way to get more of the workforce to save and a large chunk, most of the workforce to save more and a large chunk of the workforce to save anything at all. And the challenges of doing this, of course, are going to be redoubled by the big COVID squeeze on company profits and pay packets. So it's a pretty formidable challenge for a 1-hour session in the morning, but I'm delighted, in fact, that we've got the perfect panel of experts to talk us through it and see if there might be some way to navigate all of this. In particular, we're delighted to be joined by Guy Opperman, who's the Minister for Pensions and I think still also Financial Inclusion. And we've been, he's been a good friend of Prospect and we've enjoyed working with him on both halves of that. We're also joined by Pete Glancy, who's the Head of Pensions at Lloyds, has been in the fields we've just been discussing for a long time. And we're delighted that Lloyds have got behind this discussion this morning. So thank you very much for that. But immediately I'm going to hand over to former Minister David Willetts, who's now at the Resolution Foundation and also the doyen, if you like, of Britain's generation wars. I realised the prescience of his book, which is over a decade ago now, arguing that the generation wars were going to become the only story of our society, when my 9-year-old daughter started saying to me, "Okay, boomer." And I thought, well, not many people would have seen that coming in 2008 or 9 or whenever it was, David. But without further ado, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. And it's great that Prospect are organising this event. Let's get stuck in because it's a really important topic and we've got just under an hour. It's fantastic that we're joined by Guy Opperman, who is the Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion, has been MP for Hexham since 2010 and has been the Minister for Pensions till 2017. That 3-year tenure in itself is a fantastic achievement, Guy. It significantly extends the life expectancy of the average pensions minister. And I think the whole industry appreciates your real interest and commitment to the subject. And having you in this role for so long is a great asset. So we really look forward to the observations you have for us this morning. Over to you.
Well, David, thank you very much indeed. I certainly am losing the battle of the bookshelves. I am in awe of what is behind you. But obviously, I'm talking to you from the department. And it's a pleasure and an honour to be asked to speak again by Prospect and to work also with Lloyds, who I've done a conference fringe event only last week with. It is true that I am the longest serving Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion. It's a job I actually pitched for to Theresa May, and I asked her, I stupidly said to her, you really need to include financial inclusion as part of this. You're really trying to make the case for this. And to my rather large surprise and amazement, she then made me the Minister for Pensions and Financial Inclusion. It is an honour to do the job. When the Prime Minister reappointed me after the general election, one of my colleagues came to me and said, I don't know whether to congratulate you or commiserate with you. but I think it's congratulations. And it remains an honour and a privilege to do this job. It is one of the most interesting jobs in the whole of government. It is an opportunity to try and get this country match fit, not just for now, but for the next 30 to 40 years. We have obviously a massive budget, primarily taken up with state pension and the ancillary benefits to that. But it is in terms of the private pension side that we particularly focus upon to try and see what difference we can make. And the team are right that automatic enrolment is a cross-party success story that dreamt up under the Labour government, brought forward under the coalition in 2012, and then expanded by this government. And probably the single most important achievement that I've had under a succession of secretaries of state, some very good, some not quite as good, but under a number of different secretaries of state, was to try and get automatic enrolment initially to 5%, then to 8%, and to bed it in with a very significantly degree of success, I believe. And certainly the number of people opting out is very, very low. Even in the times of COVID, the number of people opting out is very, very low. And so I believe we have a success story behind us, and we certainly in the department have regular visits from overseas trying to come to us and saying, how are you going to do it better? I'll take issue with one of the opening comments that says that there are still people aren't saving quite as they should be, given that young people and women were saving at approximately 35, 38% before. They're now up to 80%. And obviously that's the 8% that we're up to, of about 10.5 million people. My personal view is that clearly we need to go further. We've legislated to go further with the 2017 review and the express statements that we've said in the House of Commons. And I don't disagree with the fundamental principle of today that the 2020s will be the defining issue as to whether we take this forward and how we take it forward. I suppose the success of AE presents us with a nice problem to have, is that how do we expand upon it? And how do we expand upon it in a time of COVID, the disruption of Brexit, and the difficulties of a potential depression if it happens on the way? I do believe that that can be done. I would take a few issues on a few things, which would be that I really believe that we can both expand pension saving, but also that we can try and create rainy day savings. And certainly the sidecar trial that we are working on is, in my view, the best example of that. I know that people on this panel will want to talk about home ownership, something that the Prime Minister is passionate about. And I'm really, my door is open because I'm curious to see if there is a product that can be created that allows people to have automatic enrolment in their savings, but at the same stage allows them to continue to save for their pension, but also to either lend to their selves or be allowed to accommodate in terms of a deposit some of the savings that they have as the 2020s go ahead and automatic enrolment pots get bigger and bigger. So it's not government policy. I need to stress that at the outset. But what I am interested in is if it's going to be, hypothetically, in 5 years' time, that the AE pot is the largest amount of savings an individual has, and if home ownership is beyond the reach of people, what are the mechanisms that you can look at to try and address that? The Australians have tried looking at that, to be fair to them, with not much success. So the main reason I accepted this, I love Prospect, great organization, but if David Willetts hasn't got the answers, I'm really rather disappointed because he is massively lost in the House of Commons, and anytime he's on a panel, I'm there, is the honest truth. So I'm curious to see what the panel produces in terms, and the questions do in terms of that. I also I'm always curious to see what suggestions people come with the way ahead. I think there is a problem with small pots, and I know that we're probably going to discuss that. I've taken the view that I have two phases of this job. If the Prime Minister is mad enough to appoint me for another 3 years, phase one is to get automatic enrolment over the line, and then bring forward the Pension Schemes Bill, which is in the House of Commons last week on Wednesday, and a few variety of other bits and bobs. Phase two is, what do you do about small pots? How do you expand automatic enrolment? And what are the next stages of pension reform? That's what we're doing in the department. We have a small pots task force working with industry to look at what they're doing. And certainly looking forward to hearing all the great and the good and the comments today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Guy. And yeah, you've sketched out a very topical agenda. Of course, just looking back, we should say, and I should have mentioned this in my introduction to you, that I think another encouraging sign for auto-enrollment, and you must have pressed on this, is that when the furlough scheme came in, one of the items that was covered within the furlough scheme were the employer's contributions to auto-enrollment. That was absolutely not guaranteed. And I think getting that in was another sign of the commitment to the auto-enroll model, and was something a lot of people noticed and appreciated.
Totally true.
Now, I should have said also at the beginning that, of course, if you do have comments, queries, do use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen so that we can get a proper discussion going. But let's now go to Pete Glancy. Pete is public policy advisor at Lloyd's. He's done a lot of thinking on this issue of how we promote flexible access to pension pots. And I think you've got a short presentation. So Pete, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. So I've been at the Lloyd's Banking Group for 30 years now, working in the pension space, and within Lloyd's Banking Group we have our Scottish Widows business. So we're in a unique position to look at the long-term savings challenge from the perspective of short-term savings, housing, and of course retirement planning. And we've been doing that for the last few years. When I started off around about 30 years ago, the final salary era was coming to an end, sadly. Personal pensions were just launching. We had a decade of the personal pension, then stakeholder pensions came along, and we had the stakeholder decade, and then of course auto-enrollment came along, and we had the auto-enrollment decade. So 3 decades, and as this seminar this morning is built, we're looking at the next decade. And I think the same will be true of the 2020s as those previous decades, in that the economy has changed, society has changed, people's lives have changed, and attitudes to pensions have changed. And one of the things that we are seeing is that people have been now given an awful lot of responsibility for making their own decisions about the financial futures. The final salary era has gone, where the employers took all of the decisions, took all of the risks, picked up all of the costs. And people are looking at 3 savings challenges. They do want to put enough money away to be able to retire and at least a little bit of comfort, preferably above the poverty line. But they also want to have a little bit of money for a rainy day. And younger people are telling us that it's critical that they get a deposit to get on the housing ladder. And having a home when you retire can make a huge difference to your quality of life in retirement. But it's very difficult for people to have enough money in today's challenging times to be able to put money into all 3 of those buckets. So then people think, well, which of those buckets is the priority? And then you get into a complex world of financial services products and different tax incentives. And we have an advice gap in this country where it's very difficult for people without a lot of money to go and get some help and get a steer on all of that. So what we've been looking at is there a way to default people into the correct savings behaviours, but potentially using a much simpler product landscape, so a single product which would allow people to save for their retirement, but give them the flexibility to get onto the housing ladder and to access money, limited amounts of money, for a rainy day when things go wrong or hard times come along. And I think that's really what we're trying to do, is explore that subject. And I don't want to take up too much time with the introduction, but happy to discuss any of those areas further. Also agree very much with the Minister. Auto-enrollment has been a huge success. Recognising it's not enough, there will be challenges in moving forward in the short term, given the backdrop of COVID on businesses and consumers. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be thinking about the next steps now, and also agreeing very much that the small pots challenge is something that government and industry need to work together to resolve.
Thanks. Pete, I'm going to come back to you with one question, in which I'll then invite Guy to comment on as well. Guy kind of put the challenges to, so what are the policy options? Well, way back this is ancient history, but when I was in the shadow cabinet as shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, we did look at flexible savings options, completely getting the point that the ability to exit from your savings might increase the amount you saved in the first place. And we were trying to find some model that would work in the pensions framework. In fact, and I developed something called a lifetime savings account. And I can still remember I was told that we needed to find a bright young backbencher who would help me on the research. And the young backbencher we hit on to help on the research was a certain Jesse Norman, who is now the financial secretary to the Treasury. And Jesse ended up doing a lot of the detailed work on it. And of course, George Osborne, as Chancellor, did experiment with the lifetime savings account. And let's face it, it hasn't really worked out. What lessons can we learn for next time round, how we could integrate it with the auto-enrolled pension pot? Because there is a bit of history now, and I don't claim we got it right first time. So what do we do next, learning the lessons from that history?
Okay, well, I'll have a go at that. I think there's two things. One is that LISA was launched and sat separately from auto-enrollment. So people had to make a decision. Do they want to get an employer contribution towards their retirement and save into a well-governed pension product with charge caps and default funds and de-risking, etc., all of that good stuff? Or do they want to opt out potentially of that very valuable arrangement and take out a LISA? Going back to the point I was making earlier, people don't have enough money, many of them, to save into both. So for many people, it's a choice of one or the other. Now, as Guy was pointing out, Nest is doing a good job with its trials on the sidecar savings. So potentially, if that was to move forward, we would have auto-enrollment, which has retirement savings and rainy day money in one product, and then LISA would give us retirement savings and property access in a different product. But it puts people in that impossible position of having to choose between the two, and that's not really something we should be putting in front of people. It shouldn't be an impossible choice. I think the other challenge is that we were trying to encourage people, and I've been in the industry for 30 years. We've been trying to encourage and nudge people to save more for a long time, and nothing we did really worked until auto-enrollment came along, because it defaulted people into the right savings behaviours. So on the auto-enrollment side, it's driven by payroll, it's driven by behavioural finance, it defaults people into the right savings behaviour, whereas LISA required people to make a conscious purchase decision. So you've got two very different products with competing goals that are given to people in two very different ways. And I think if you want to make all of those agendas consistent, you need to find a mechanism to bring the two together. And I would go down the auto-enrollment route. I'd build it into payroll, default people into the right savings behaviours, increase the auto-enrollment contributions at the right point in time, and then allow that flexibility.
Thanks. Guy, any observations on this? What do you think are the lessons from this?
I have to presage everything I say in that I'm not making government policy, but I have looked at this a lot, and I think that you need to have a simple process. And I think it's right to say that there are three saving vehicles: retirement, rainy day money, and deposit money. And whether you want to say those are A, B, and C, but the long and the short of it is, if you're going to use automatic enrolment as the vehicle for all of this, which I think probably you are, because it's the big success story, it's already defaulting, it's clearly that working out the next stage, there are choices open to government. Now, the obvious choice, and the one everybody wants me to do, is to simply raise automatic enrolment to, say, 12% or whatever, and be in a position that it just stays exactly as it is. Now, that's the easy way forward at some stage when we can all afford it. The alternative approach, which I'm looking at myself, and that I can assure you officials haven't started looking at all, but I'm certainly looking at this, is, again, taking a sort of an ABC approach, is that when you reach a certain amount of your automatic enrolled pot, right, you then are able to take a certain amount of that and put it into rainy day money. So it is absolutely crucial to me that there's almost, no, it's not true to say there's no point having a retirement savings if you don't have rainy day money, but it is a very, it's very important that people have the £500 to cater for the car that breaks down or the washing machine that breaks down. And access to that is utterly, utterly crucial. And I think successive prime ministers and secretaries of state for work and pensions have begun to see that. And it seems to me that you have to have a facility going forward that, as you expand automatic enrolment, and even if you didn't expand automatic enrolment, rainy day money happens by default effectively. So whatever the future holds, you have to be diverting some form of earnings in some shape or form to rainy day funds. Now, and you don't need a lot. You only need £500 because that's your car breaking down or the washing machine breaking down, which is, as we all know, the crucial problem that everybody has that leads them to debt, difficulty, and disaster. You then move on to the deposit. And the question is for me is, are you able to, once you reach a particular level of your automatic enrolled pot, are you able then to find some way of ring fencing that pot and either it being used as a potential deposit or part of a deposit, or it being acting as effectively a loan to a deposit system? So the reality is if I have £5,000 and I go to Haltwhistle in Northumberland, I can buy a house. It's not going to be a great house, but I can definitely buy a house. Now, the beauty of that is that with my £5,000, I'm on the property ladder. Okay. Now, obviously, that doesn't help you in the southeast of England or in London or whatever. But the simple point is that for low earners, a small amount of deposit can get them on the housing ladder, in terms that they won't be using that AE pot for a very long period of time. Now, that presupposes, obviously, that house prices will continue to rise. It presupposes that you're capable of paying your mortgage. It presupposes so many things. But I'm not aware of anybody who has started to look seriously at how it is you use automatic enrolled pots and what vehicles that we then have going forward to allow effectively usage of that pot for alternative means, which means it doesn't come out of your pension, but it's just used for a dual purpose. Now, because the reality of automatic enrolment, it's a savings pot, as we all know, and it's not like the traditional type of pension. So, and ultimately, this is people's money, and I want to see to what extent and what the cutoffs are. Clearly, you can't do it with 50 quid. And you'd clearly £5,000, it seems to me, would be the very minimum. 10 would be preferable, but it's going to take people a while to get to those figures, which is why I think it's perfectly legitimate to have a discussion now, because the truth is, as we're saving 8% a year, these pots are going to grow pretty quickly in reality. And within 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to be facing people with the wonderful reality of having over £10,000 plus in their pensions, but not necessarily having any money for a deposit. Now, my job, it seems to me, is make sure that some of the rainy day happens. And I'm looking at how we default that to happen. But then I think it's a perfectly legitimate discussion to see, are we able to find anybody who's doing this elsewhere? I'm not aware of the Australians pursuing this product. I'm looking at other countries as to what they're doing, but my door is open for those people who come up with bright ideas and want to steal the best practice of other people.
Very interesting, very useful. I'm going to go straight back to you, Pete, because actually this is a challenge that your own thinking at Lloyd's is very relevant to. So how would you respond to Guy's challenge?
Well, in terms of international precedents, if you like, I mean, the 401k system in America allows access, more flexibility, and the Kiwi Saver in New Zealand allows more access, albeit they've got a very high state pension, so it's not fulfilling the sort of the heavy load, if you like, that auto enrolment plays in this country. I mean, we did some research, I think it was 2019, we surveyed about 3,000 pension savers, and we asked people of different generations about what would encourage them to save more. 70% of people in their 20s said they would put more money into a long-term savings product if it gave them the flexibility to get onto the housing ladder at some point. And 60 to 65% of the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds were saying that they would put more money into a long-term savings product if there was a flexibility to get access on a rainy day, because people are terrified of not having the rainy day savings, and they really want to get a home for their family. So that would tell you two things. One is, if you wanted to increase the statutory rates of savings from 8% to 9, 10, 12, whatever in the future, attaching flexibility to those increases would be popular with the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds. And if you didn't want to do it on a statutory basis, you just wanted to rely on giving people a greater incentive to use long-term savings products, then just making that flexibility available would encourage people to save. So I think there's a definite benefit to the flexibility. We've also got 5 million self-employed people in the country, And what they're telling us, well, they're not covered by auto-enrolment at the moment. They're saying that self-employed people want greater flexibility on the way in and greater flexibility on the way out than the current pensions framework currently allows. Flexibility in the way in, because their earnings can be very lumpy. They can have very good years when they want to put some lump sums away for their retirement. And flexibility on the way out, because they're small business, whether they're a photographer or whatever, they might need some new camera equipment or a new van. They just can't tie money up for decades. So the self-employed are no different from everybody else. They want flexibility as well. So I think that there are examples out there. You know, Kiwi Saver is a good name. I'd like to see a Brit Saver product where people can, you know, put the money away here and do something similar. So.
Thanks. And just to be clear, are we talking about, we're not borrowing against the security of the funds in the pension, or actually extracting the money?
There's two models. I mean, the model that we've been working on the savings side of our business has been helping people acquire the deposit to get on to the housing ladder. The other model, and I remember this, things come in circles. When I first started out 30 years ago, there was a product called a pensions mortgage. And this was in the final salary era. And basically what people were able to do is they were able to take out a mortgage and they were able to use essentially assign part or all of the tax-free lump sum to pay off the mortgage. So the lenders knew that you were going to retire with a certain tax-free lump sum, and they were happy to use that as security for the mortgage. Now that's a different model, and we've got colleagues in Lloyds Banking Group on the banking side of the business who are looking at the potential of that option. Personally, I think it's going to be horses for courses. It might work for some people. The savings option might work for others. It's worth exploring all the ways of getting pensions and home ownership into a more consistent shape.
The advantage of the lending against the security model might be that it would be by a regulated financial service provider, and that in turn would enable some of the requirements to be clear that they were being met. We certainly, going back to lifetime savings account work, we're interested in that model. Guy, any further comments? I mean, you've stimulated a lively discussion here.
So I think I'd take issue with the point made that people want to have a flexibility, and 60% say this. The reason I think that we had to do automatic enrolment is that if you trust people to save for a pension and also save for a rainy day and save for a deposit, it just doesn't happen. So automatic enrolment results because government has to take over a nudge. Now, I believe that we can still continue to do that nudge, but then add on certain bits and bobs to it. I take the point about the 401k because, and certainly if I was not restrained by COVID, I had got a trip planned to America to try and see some of the sidecar savings trials that they're doing in America. So Harvard are doing one in particular, which is very interesting. And I was also going to then sit down with a series of my colleagues in the States to talk 401ks and how it is that flexibility could work going forward, because the DWP is very, very good, but it's quite British focused, and it's not necessarily as good as it could be potentially to at looking at international models. So I certainly want to look at the international model of the 401k. I think the problem with the lifetime savings account, and no disrespect to George Osborne or my dear colleague Jesse Norman, the living personification of Edmund Burke on earth at this present stage, is that a lifetime savings account is a really dull name. No one really understood it. And it was one of many treasury products that just didn't fly, frankly. And it was a bit like, how can I put this delicately about George, that there was always a new product coming out of the treasury, and it was always try this and try LISA or try that, and whereas you have to just have one thing and really commit to it. I mean, the fair point is made about KiwiSaver. It does what it says on the tin. Everybody can talk about it. Everybody knows exactly what it is about. So my gut feeling is, why would you change the model of automatic enrolment when everybody understands it? Everyone's got their payment system sorted, and that what you're talking about is how do we tweak what we've got already to provide you greater flexibility and capability going forward. Now, that's certainly what I see as the way ahead. And, the whole thrust of this is, what does the 2020 look like for private pensions? Clearly, expansion of AE in some shape or form must take place. How we afford that, what that is, and what the products that go with it are the crucial issue. from my mind, it would be a lesson missed, sorry, an opportunity missed if we didn't learn the lessons from abroad and we didn't look at the possibility of, if we just go here, go to 12%, that's it, game over. In my view, we're missing a chance, and we should try and look at how we increase, how we default a savings product into somebody's bank account. And that for me is utterly key. And then I've begun to, since the general election and since the PM has really focused on housing and deposits, for the last year, I've started to think in this addled brain of mine, how is it we can start looking at addressing deposits? And that seems to me a legitimate conversation to have, and options need to be looked at. There are 3 or 4 potential ways ahead, but I certainly think A would be the base.
Right. Thank you very much. And by the way, we've had an interesting observation on our Q&A function from a participant saying, be careful what you wish for. The rationale of the tax relief is that it is saving for a pension. If you broaden the purposes of the pot, will the tax relief be in jeopardy? Which is a salutary warning.
Well, I think every single, I'll answer that one very easily,
Yep.
is that every single chancellor takes a good, long, hard look at tax relief to automatic enrolment and all pension savings, and some are more enthusiastic than others. I think we all remember, anyone in the pensions industry remembers Philip Hammond, obviously no longer with us in the House of Commons, but now gracing many a boardroom around the country, more than George Osborne, hard to believe, but it's true. And Hammond was, I think, quoted as saying he was a little bit dubious about the high rates of taxpayer subsidy for pensions. But I clearly, that is something that we all have to be aware of. How can I put it that way?
Yeah, yeah. There are we've got a few minutes left, 25 minutes max. We've talked a lot about this particular issue of the sidecar, the other savings vehicles. But perhaps we should also focus on some other angles that have come up with. And of course, it is a very tricky economic environment. And the dilemma, look, we wrestle with it at Resolution Foundation. We care about the living standards of the less affluent half of the population. But if they save more, does that affect their ability, their living standards today? What it'd be interesting to have both of the panelists thought about how actually we can get people to pay more into pensions when the economic scene is so tough. I mean, there has been an agenda of broadening access to the auto-enrolled pension. Perhaps, we've had a reference already to the self-employed. There are some issues around people with several different very low paid jobs. Is any of that kind of expansion agenda off the table now, Guy, given that circumstances are so tricky, or can we look for further expansion in future?
So I can certainly dispel any rumors that we're not going to expand as we've previously indicated. I think timing is a definite issue. So, the lowering the earnings level and starting from the first pound has always been government policy since the 2017 automatic enrolment review. But at the same stage, we said that we'd do that by the mid-2020s. It seems to me that I have a pensions bill. In fact, I've got 2 at the moment. Pensions bills are like buses. You wait for ages and ages and 2 come along in a week. So obviously, I'm doing the pensions bill in respect of state pension, the Social Security uprating bill 2 weeks ago. Last week, I was doing the pension schemes bill. The pension schemes bill is 200 pages, 130 clauses, very, very substantial. It seems to me whoever occupies this amazing job for the remainder of this parliament will do another pensions bill. And that pensions bill will include, in my view, automatic enrolment expansion, taking forward further measures on that. What that looks like is clearly a matter for government right round and discussion, but at the very least, one would be expecting to do the 2017 automatic enrolment review and also resolving the relief at source issues that are in the Conservative Party manifesto. It's more of a treasury point, but it's definitely there. And then looking to what extent you are able to go higher in terms of savings levels. So I don't think there's any doubt that we will be doing that this Parliament. There'll be other things in that piece of legislation in my view. Probably super funds will, you'll be doing that. There's other bits and bobs of particular bits of pensions legislation that will require primary legislation. So I think that will continue, and at some stage before 2024 general election, there'll be a second pensions bill, and a substantial one again. At the same stage, on self-employed, I wouldn't say that it's an unfinished symphony, but I'm completely conscious that automatic enrolment has not been embraced by the self-employed to the degree that I would have liked it to have been done. Now, it is difficult, and this goes back to my point. If you ask a man in the street, would you like to save for your pension, save for a deposit, and save for a rainy day, and it to be all flexible and able to access it? They'd all go, yes, fine. Can I take 10% or 15% of your salary straight off every Monday morning at the start of the month out of your pay packet? Well, no, I'd like to be in control of that. Is the practical reality. So hence why automatic enrolment had to be invented. It had to be a default service. And truth is, once it's up and running and it's defaulting, people accept it. That's the nature of nudge theory. And it has been a fantastic success, probably the greatest example of nudge theory that there's ever been, in my view. Now, how we persuade the self-employed to go ahead and embrace automatic enrolment, in my view, is difficult. There is in reality probably only one way, and that is by, as we move to making tax digital, and as your tax becomes ever more and your accounts become ever more online, it seems to me inevitable that there should be a defaulting out of your earnings and your tax automatic savings to a self-employed automatic enrolled pot. Now, the structure of that, a little complicated, but not frankly that much different from automatic enrolment. Whether you do it on a straight earnings basis, or whether you do it on a taxation deduction is hard to say with self-employed. Having been 20 years self-employed, most of it white collar as a barrister, and some of it blue collar as a fat jockey. I've done both professions, and in some respects, I would have really struggled if you took the earnings straight out. And on other respects, every barrister knows that the tax man and the VAT man come at the end of the day and diverts money from earnings to be paid every 3 months or 12 months by way of a fund that you set aside. So every barrister I know has a default bank account into which they pay 20% of their salary or 30% of their salary for payment of VAT and tax on a regular basis. That's just how they exist. Now, with the self-employed, I'm sure we could do a bit of both. So you would try and default out of their bank account, with their permission, obviously, some money to go into a pension fund. So when they get paid, hypothetically, £1,000 as a builder for a particular job, it goes into their account, and then their account immediately defaults that into a pot. And then possibly you give them tax relief specific to the self-employed. Again, that applied when I was a barrister, that when you're doing your online tax, that the tax man takes money and pops it straight back into your automatically enrolled pot on an ongoing basis. That, I think, is the only way forward. It will require some structure, but certainly with the self-employed, it's not enough people are embracing automatic enrolment, although they can do so.
Yeah. That is very interesting, and it's I think the fact that this agenda of expanding access to auto enrollment is still on the table, with all that, of course, with all those subtleties and care about exactly what the timing is, that itself is very encouraging. The gossip, and Guy may not wish to comment on it, the gossip was in the early stages of the crisis. The Treasury did look as to whether they should sort of completely suspend auto enrolment while the market was in such a bad state. And thank heavens they decided to stick with it. And as I said earlier, actually include it in further. Pete, do you want to comment on that? Any observations of yours? What would you like to see in the next pensions bill after the two that Guy is already steering through the Commons?
Well, first of all, I was intrigued to hear that Guy's planning his trip to the United States. I've been trying to persuade Lloyds Banking Group to send me on a trip to New Zealand to have a look at the Kiwi saver, but I suspect the minister will be in the US before I get New Zealand. Now, I would endorse all of the Minister's thinking in relation to the answer to the last question around the self-employed and where we are moving auto-enrolment forward. I think that we would like to see the commitments from the 2017 review delivered as soon as practical, given the economic backdrop, reducing the age of auto-enrolment from 22 to 18. That will increase the average lifetime pot by about 15%, which is meaningful. We would like to see band earnings removed. So for the practice of employers deducting the first £6,000 of your salary, for low earners, that could see people's pension pots increase by 150%, which is massive. But the other area that we are concerned about is multi-jobbers. So we survey 6,000 people every year. And if you take our sample of 6,000 projected forward to the population as a whole, there are about 6.8 million people in the UK doing more than one job. And at the moment, auto-enrolment only kicks in if you're earning £10,000 or more. So some people could be earning £20,000, £30,000 across multiple jobs, but not be auto-enrolled in relation to any of those jobs. So we do think something has to be done about the 10K trigger. And we're also very conscious that in terms of part-time work and multi-jobbers, 2/3 of these people are women, and we have a gender pensions gap that we need to address. So the 10K trigger is something that we need to think about. I think that would be the big point to call out there.
Thank you very much.
Yes, do you want me to? I'll address some of the Q&A which I've got open in front of me, and see to what extent I can address that. But I don't do a panel with you without knowing your view. So I'll give you a chance to think about it, because there is no point me doing a panel, no disrespect to Prospect and Lloyds, without working out what the man who did my job in opposition wants to do. So I'll try and address some of the points in the Q&A. So in terms of house prices, clearly we need to build more houses. I think the Prime Minister is absolutely dialed in on that. I don't think there is any question whatsoever that he is committed to expansion of supply, and certainly I think there is ways of doing that. I've also looked at, in terms of pensions, you'll be aware that we've looked at what's called illiquids, and I don't see any reason why some pension funds wouldn't be building, much as a housing association builds them, housing itself and then letting them back. It's a perfectly legitimate long-term investment. I'd be encouraging them to do that. Certainly the liquids consultation that I issued in September, obviously everybody will have read it and will be responding to it. I accept that, but it is available to in all good bookshops, as they say. But that, in my view, will increase supply, because if pension funds start thinking, well, we could build houses and we could let them, particularly if we were letting them to participants in our individual pension, and then they retain the value of the property longer term, you could address both starter homes and retirement homes. It seems to me, particularly in retirement homes, if they were to do that and to build retirement estates, it would be on a long-term lease basis. They would still own the property at the end of the day. Individual parents would be able to free up their assets, but would have a long-term property asset. So that's something that we're already looking at. In terms of whether the pension sector is an enabler of progress or a barrier to progress, I often joke, obviously this is a joke, that it is my job to bring the pensions sector into the 20th century, let alone the 21st century. But it is unquestionably my view that a system that is still sending out 43-page incomprehensible written pension statements is a joke, and we need to change that. We absolutely need to have simpler statements. So I am trying to do two key things to make the pensions sector. I'm trying to bring it online, hence the pension dashboard, which is a titanic project but progresses at pace, and there's matters in the pension schemes bill. And secondly, trying to produce simpler statements whereby we reduce the 43 pages that nobody reads, very few people can understand, and I've got pension professionals who genuinely cannot understand their pension statement, into a simple statement that all look the same, that all, then you actually can have some price comparison as well. You could actually have the constituent having some degree of comprehension of what they're dealing with, what the charges are, and basically standardizing the approach so that you then have a pension awareness month. So I'm a massive supporter of all the work that everybody from the Pension Geeks to Scottish Widows and other companies, I should stress other companies do this, of the Pension Awareness Day and the Pension Awareness Month, So that you should make, for example, September should be Pension Awareness Month, where genuinely the holy grail is you go this is in a post-COVID world, you go into a pub and everybody has their pension statement, and Fred and Joe, as they drink a pint, are actually going, okay, now I understand this, you understand this, why are you not saving more? Aviva are charging you this, and Prudential are charging you this. What's the situation? And you actually get proper awareness and understanding of those particular things. In terms of some of the other questions, I think I've addressed most of them. David Robbins raised the first-time buyers bidding against us, dipping into pension pots. I mean, I think clearly if there are more people on the market looking for property, clearly that can potentially drive up competition, which means drives up prices. The practical reality is there is a large amount of people out there who want to buy a house. That's the practical reality. And it's the lack of deposit which is holding them back, not the ability to pay a mortgage as such. So the question is, how do you assist them to get the deposit? Now, you've got to cheapen the value of a property by building more property. And you've got to be in a position that you make the products more amenable. But I certainly think there is a capacity going forward. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. And that's a really useful set of answers to the comments that have come in. Pete, do you want to comment? And then I might add some comments of my own. But Pete, you start.
I think just one point to pick up on, I think, is the investment side. If we start saving more as a country, you could argue it's going to impact consumer spending. And we need consumer spending to help the economy recover, medium into long term. But we've got various estimates that the pot of pension assets in the UK range between about 2.5 trillion to 4 trillion. But whichever number you look at, it's bigger than the UK economy. And at the moment, there's a very short-term focus on those assets. Individual companies and providers are trying to get short-term returns to compete against each other for customers, etc., which stops the money being invested in the long-term interest. And some of that money isn't really behaving patriotically. A lot of it's invested abroad and it's helping other countries around the world recover from their COVID challenges, etc. And it does make sense if there's a tax incentive wrapper in the UK to save money into a vehicle where there's such an amount of UK assets sitting in it that some of that money should be used in the long-term interest of the economy. So I would like to see more of that money going into things like social housing and retirement housing. And we and others are doing that. We invest in retirement housing and social housing to back our annuity book. But in terms of DC pensions, and we will be responding to the consultation, and it's a great timing for this consultation, there are lots of things that we in government could do together to make those assets work much more patriotically in terms of the long-term interest of our economy and our society.
Yeah, I very much agree with that point. And it's great that Guy's got that consultation out because, and I think it's actually a force that promotes saving. If people had a clearer sense of the exciting things that their pensions, the money saved in their pensions pot, how it was being put to work and how interesting that is. Certainly the green agenda matters to younger savers. Sadly, the whole Neil Woodford episode has been a blow to people trying to promote investment in illiquid instruments. But I have to say, with another hat on, my interest in science and technology, it is frustrating how hard it is to get our big pension investors to put money into early stage technology when it will be illiquid and it can't be easily given a mark-to-market valuation, and it's not all going to work out, but some of it certainly will work out. And we've made a bit of progress there for the DB regime. We need to make progress now on DC because it's a clear gap. And you could imagine them partnering with vehicles like the British Business Bank in making some of those technology investments. A couple of other observations. I do think that at some point, the challenge of kind of crediting some people who are not currently participating in AE into the system will come back on the agenda. There is a gender issue there, carers, some other groups. I think it will be, in the long run, we are storing up problems if they're not able to build up any kind of pensions pot. And then thirdly, it was fascinating hearing Pete's observations and Guy's on the earlier attempt at the lifetime savings account, which I was involved in, as I said, in opposition. I think Boris's preoccupation with helping people now get a deposit is a fantastic opportunity to revive that agenda and learning lessons about how complicated it was in the past and how we didn't stick with it. There is now a clear, in the 10 years in which in some form or other Conservatives have been in government, there has always been some kind of scheme now to help first-time buyers get a deposit. There have been differing attempts. So that is a sustained interest in policy, which I think is not going to go away. Linking that to the sidecar of the pensions pot would be really worthwhile, because I don't see any end in sight to attempts to help young people get started on the housing ladder with their deposits. So I do think that is a policy opportunity there, which we should seize. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Guy. It was very good of you to scan the Q&As. I'm trying to see, you've been very good at engaging with the issues that have been raised. How is your consultation going on the illiquids, by the way?
All right, so much to say. Let me start with your Woodford point, because I think it's really important. There is no doubt that Woodford has spooked the horses, for want of a better expression, and that is a real setback. And I think it's a setback. I'd like to, find all difficulty and disaster as an opportunity, not as a crisis, in my view. And Woodford, in my view, has allowed us to do a reset. Clearly, there is complications with an individual asset manager investing in a way without necessarily communicating how he's doing that. But the principle remains: if I have a large pension fund and I'm investing solely in gilts, I am not going to be getting a huge return. But the alternative to that is, so what else am I going to be investing in? I personally believe, as part of a balanced portfolio, and illiquids is a very good idea to have an investment in. I think the only reason I'm doing this is because lots of people ask me to do it. Some organizations, Legal & General, for example, are ahead of the game and are doing more than others. But I also believe it massively will engage individual savers if they are able to point to as they're driving to work. If I'm saving with a particular organization, all right, and the best way I can give you this is key workers, but I can also do it for retirement people as well. If I'm driving to work and I drive past a building site, and that building site says this is being built by the pension fund of X, which will then be let to key workers so that they don't have to, and the easiest example is in the southeast, but it also applies in any urban conurbation, so that they then don't have to commute in 2.5 hours, but they can actually live on site and work on site. But that will be owned by them, let to the said key worker at a reasonable rate, just like a housing association does, but the pension fund will own that. That will make me feel very good about my pension. I will understand what is happening with that pension, and I will be encouraged by that. And I will think, this is a really good usage of my money that is doing a public good, but is also producing me a legitimate return. I think there's a massive engagement that will happen there, and that will transform the way it is done. The second is, Alistair asked in the chat about environmental matters, and he's entirely right that the likes of Greta Thunberg, who I met last year when she came to Parliament, and other environmental campaigners, David Attenborough is another one, obviously, have inspired many people. And quite rightly, people are concerned that their environmental concerns, they want to, if you have kids and grandkids, you want there to be a planet on for them to live on in 100 years' time. And yet at the same stage, they want to have a fiscal return and security in their retirement. How do you balance those two things together? So the government passed the ESG reforms, which came into force just over a year ago, and they have totally transformed the way in which pensions are investing. And in my view, there is real opportunity for environmental investing to then trigger greater savings, but also engagement by individual people. So I believe very strongly that we can have the best of both worlds on that. And I believe that we are driving that forward. Illiquids, I think, will make a big difference, because just to finish on and bring it sort of 360, if I care about the planet and I want to do investing that is good for the planet, and I have a substantial pension fund, I would like a pension fund to be making a major solar farm, to, instead of just doing like 20 or 30 hectares, Or I was on Saturday, I spent some time on a forestry estate in West Northumberland, and it was considered a large investment. There was only 30 hectares. I was laughing at them because I was saying, well, I'd like 1,000, 2,000 hectares invested by a pension fund on a 30-year play, and they will pretty much be guaranteed a 2% return and a really decent return going forward. So I'd like much bigger things done on illiquids.
I think that is really important just in the last few minutes, because in terms of how we promote saving, of course, there's issues around tax relief and everything, but the sheer excitement of some of the things that pensions could invest in, which Guy has just been capturing, I think, especially for young people, is a crucial incentive to save. And I agree, I find it very frustrating. I don't think the industry does enough to convey that as the purpose, what the savings do. We're nearly running out of time, but Pete, is there anything you quickly want to add to pull the strings together?
I would like to add just a point on that last point there. I spoke a number of years ago to the Queensland superannuation scheme in Australia, so one of the big super funds, and they were doing exactly that. They were taking money in their pension savings pots, and they were investing it in local infrastructure and in helping to boost the economy within the Queensland state, and then we're promoting that investment, and it was creating a virtuous cycle of people seeing the benefits of what their pension was doing and then saving more. And obviously the UK is a bigger nation, a bigger economy than Australia. So the one question for us to potentially wrestle with is, would we do this on a national scale at the UK, or would we do it on a regional scale, a Northern Powerhouse type investment fund, a Southeast fund, a Scotland fund, a Northern Ireland fund? At what level would you create that sort of infrastructure to create that local engagement? I don't have an answer, but it's a question. Down in Australia, they're doing it at it's kind of state level, it would seem.
Yeah, well, a levelling up fund would be, given the quite unendable interest of the government in that agenda at the moment, a levelling up fund, that might even be the kind of thing in which you find there's co-investment from other parties. That's a very, very
So
good...
I think, David, I'll come to you on that very quickly on that. So there are a number of parliamentary colleagues. Clearly, I'm part of government, so I'm obviously bound by collective responsibility, but there are a number of parliamentary colleagues who are very keen to push a green gilt. We don't have one in this country. Clearly, the Germans have just done a £26 billion green gilt. The French have just done very substantial ones. The Polish have done ones. And the French one, which I think was about 15 billion, was 50% invested by UK pension funds, which I find a little illogical and bizarre. So it is very much the case that we are pressing Treasury and explaining to them there is a very large demand for all the reasons that we've identified for a green gilt. And now, clearly, it's complicated to create these things. I don't diminish the difficulty of doing this, but out of pre-existing gilts, why could not, say, 10, 20% be allocated to a green gilt, which would clearly free up huge potential investment, so that we were then able to invest that in a particular way going forward. That would be, and pension funds could at least bid into that. That would be the easiest way forward, and certainly is what a lot of other countries have done. I'll pause there.
Well, I think that is great. And actually, we are now running out of time, but I'm very grateful to Pete. I'm grateful to Guy. I think there are some very clear themes that have emerged. Flexibility on access to the savings, particularly linked to the need to get a deposit for the housing market, perhaps using sidecars, perhaps triggered by your the amount in your pension pot going above a certain amount. That is a very lively agenda, which we are all very interested in. We've ended up with on this important issue of greater flexibility on the assets, especially the DC pots can be invested in. We very much hope that the illiquids consultation that Guy has launched reached a good conclusion. We don't want the wrong lessons to be drawn from Woodford. And then we shouldn't forget some of the other more technical issues we touched on earlier. Multi-jobs, people with multi-jobs, where the system ought to be able to link them up so that we can see that they're above the threshold. I think that's a very important issue, and the different little pension pots that really need to be linked into lower administrative costs. I think that's another policy challenge, to add to the many that Guy's got on his agenda and the 2 bits of legislation he's steering through the Commons. Very good. Pete and Lloyd to join us and sponsor this event. Good for Prospect for bringing us together. And above all, thank you to Guy, the Pensions Minister, for sparing your time to join us today. Thank you very much indeed, Guy.
Pleasure, teams. Thank you.
Okay.